It's a pleasure to be here. I work for Local Authority Building Control. We're a sort of like an umbrella thing that look after all the councils in the country. When I say look after them, we kind of look after you. I was talking to one of you earlier, and we were talking about bad councils that we don't like working with, and basically come and talk to me and we'll put you in touch with a good council, because you can work with them like you can with our competitors. I don't usually like talking about our competitors, but I'm sure you don't use them anyway, so I don't need to tell you about them. I'm going to talk to you today about changes to the actual building control system, rather than the nitty-gritty of what's in Part L and things like that, which makes a nice change for me. And also very briefly about the warranty system, just because it's changed a bit. So why did we do it? Why have we had it? I think we've probably all covered this bit to death. We all know about the government and one in, one out, and it's going to be the greenest government ever, which is lovely. Reduced regulatory burden on house builders. That was all a bit smoke and mirrors this time, wasn't it? We thought we might get rid of Part P this time around, in terms of reduced burden, but that didn't happen either. So we're trying to look after micro businesses, we're trying to look after startups, but it would be quite nice if we were trying to look after registered social landlords and things like that as well, wouldn't it? We have in this country we actually now have two separate systems. It always used to be building regs for England and Wales. Who does Wales? Anybody cover Wales? No, don't need to go into that then, but they have their own building regs now. And it's worse in Wales. Welsh Part L, don't go and build anything in Wales. Welsh Part L is now much worse than English Part L. So for the first time, that is a difference. It is a split, as well as their new requirement for sprinklers. So the impact of that, certainly in England, potentially a smaller impact in England than in Wales. It's intended to be boosting home building, which would be good for all of us, wouldn't it? Introduction of more permitted development, which is very scary, because you'll now be allowed to build much bigger, hideous extensions on your houses without applying for planning permission, unless, of course, they're listed or something. Obviously, a big problem for us in building control, because when you put a headline out saying, oh, great, you can build what you like now, they assume that means you don't need building regs on them either. And obviously, you do. Nothing at all has changed in terms of what do you need building regs for, in terms of extensions and things like that. So still need it. No problem. In Scotland, some changes in Scotland as well. Anybody work in Scotland? No, so you don't care about this either then, do you? This is going well. This is going quite well. It's always good to hear. We've had lots of local acts repealed, mostly in terms of fire legislation. I'm going to go through some of those and see what we talked about. Sprinklers, like I said, no plan at the moment to bring sprinklers in England. But they are being brought in Wales, and contrary to popular belief, they're not bringing them in Cornwall either, because they were at one point, because Cornwall wants to be a separate country, so they were going to have new sprinkler regs in Cornwall, but they've made it voluntary, so you know what that means. The warranty link rule I'm going to talk about. Reg 7, materials and workmanship, that's a change. That's quite an interesting one. Reg 7 is the bit that actually building control can say to people, do you know what you've just built is rubbish. Because there's building reg standard and then there's quite good. Well, there's also below building reg standard, which doesn't meet reg 7 for materials and workmanship. So we have still got that bit of power there to say you're actually just not good enough, which is quite handy to know if you're the client. Because you can come to us and say, we don't think this is good enough, can you help us? And we can. So that's quite handy. Inspection frameworks I'm going to talk to you about. That's a big change. That is a big new change, and some changes to EPCs and things which we've talked about. Biggest change to building regs obviously is the visual one. Any of you actually use approved document? Anybody own an approved document? Good. Fantastic. Have you noticed there's a change? There is now a change between the ones with the green white writing and the ones with the white writing. The white writing have been completely redesigned. So they've designed them so that if you use a smartphone or an iPad or something, you can actually flick through them and find things much easier than it used to be to find them on the ones with the green writing. So you'll notice that some of them have been changed, a lot of them haven't. If they're still on the green writing, like the one at the top, they've just had a couple of tweaks and a few things changed to make them sort of fit in with all the other legislation that's changed, like Eurocodes and things. But if it's now got the white writing, it's been completely rewritten and completely redrafted. So they are better and they are a bit easier. What's actually changed then for the building control system? Not that much, which is why when I got asked to do this talk, I thought, what am I going to talk about for half an hour? I can always talk for half an hour, so not a problem. Why has anything changed? Well, if they don't change things, people forget that building regs are there, don't they, really? So you have to keep changing them so people keep up to date with them. European Energy Performance of Buildings Directive got changed slightly. Our Green Deal, which obviously has had a massive impact. We really, really want the Green Deal to work. So building control, contrary to popular belief, is not anti-Green Deal. We are very pro-Green Deal. We just want the right people to be advising people. I think that's fair to say. I think we might leave that one there. Don't you? Reg 12, Part P. Part P is a good change because Part P changed to actually reflect what was happening in real life. Because in real life, what was happening, you know, you can either use a Part P competent electrician and get it all done beautifully, or you can use your Uncle Albert and then, you know. But what people were doing was using Uncle Albert to do all the expensive bit, like all pulling cables through and things, and then they were finding somebody in the pub who was Part P compliant and saying, can you come and sign it off and pretend that you did it? Well, what they've basically done is they've changed the regs to introduce that as an actual official way of doing it, which is much better. Because it brings more things into the radar, let's say. So there's far more chances of us getting compliance. But I'm assuming that all of you use Part P competent electricians. Yes. Some of you don't know, but that's fine. Notification, how you notify us about things. Do any of you remember in the olden days, building control, when you put an application in, you sent it in by pigeon or whatever, and a few months later, building control would write back to you and they'd send you a set of postcards. Do you remember? We used to send out these postcards, which were really useful if you were building a loft conversion and you got 3 postcards about foundations and DPCs and things. Well, we don't do that anymore. You'll be pleased to know. We now recognise that some people have mobile phones and some people like using emails and text messaging and things like that. So we've actually got a complete change in how we work out what we want to come and see on your project. Much, much better. The regs say the builder must notify us at the start and finish of work. No change. That's always been, I mean, otherwise how are we going to know what they're doing? We may issue, it says may, an inspection service plan before the work starts, which is kind of like the modern equivalent of sending you 12 postcards that meant nothing. We'll now send you an email saying, on your job, we're going to need to look at the insulation, that steel, and the finish, which is a lot more productive. And it means we just charge you for what we need to do. You only pay for what's required. Wow, that's quite exciting, isn't it? Because that's not how building control used to work. So it's really good. And it also says at the end of the job, we have to issue a free completion certificate. And I haven't yet found a council that wasn't issuing a free completion certificate, but there must have been some or they wouldn't have brought it in. New list of competent person schemes. Obviously, all this sort of stuff is on the DCLG website. Most Green Deal things can actually be self-certified apart from solid floor insulation. I was just going to mention, is everybody aware of the requirements for renovation of thermal elements? Such as when you take the roof off, take the slates off, change the felt, put the slates back on, and it used to be a repair and you were just allowed to get on with it, and now you aren't. And you need a building regs application because you need to insulate it to current standards unless it already is, and we need to sign it off. Everybody, please nod. Tell me you knew about that. Yeah, lots of people don't know about that. So we're constantly trying to get that message out. You know, it also applies to floors. So if you change substantially the floor and you need to insulate it and you need a building regs application. So planned maintenance, that could have a huge impact if you've not already thought about it. It also applies to walls. So if you take off more than 25% of the render on the outside of a house and re-render it, all the plaster, that actually needs upgrading, it needs insulating and it needs inspecting. So I should be here at lunch if you want to talk about that and confess or whatever, you know. Statutory notifications then, we used to have all these statutory things that you had to tell us when you reached a stage, most of which didn't apply, so most people just ignored them, which was all quite pointless. That has changed. So now the only statutory ones are before starting and when it's complete or occupied, which is more sense. It encourages, hopefully, a bit more communication, a bit more just talking about how the project's going, because that's how people want to work, isn't it? So you can notify us. We want you to notify us. The government didn't really know what to do about this, so they asked us at LABC, because we've still got sort of 70% of the building control market. They said, how would you like to do this? How could you introduce something that actually would work and actually make the whole process a bit less painful? So we came up with this inspection service plan, and we've written a load of guidelines to go with it. So it's all there, it's all set out, it's all pretty straightforward. And then they sent out a circular letter. Don't you love the image that a circular letter gives you? I wish they would send them out as circular letters, don't you? It would be a lot more exciting. It would stop the chief executives putting them in the bin at the council and not circulating them to the rest of the people that actually need the information, wouldn't it? They have confirmed, DCLG have confirmed that the local authority can only require notification where they actually intend to go out and inspect it. So it's reduced the burden on the contractor, which is nice. Is it new? No, of course it isn't new, because in our building control performance standards, which we've had since 2006, it said there that we had to use our professional skill and judgment in sorting out priorities. So if you've got a house where there's very little going on, but the roof's complicated, you're going to want to look at the roof more than anything else. You're going to need to look at the insulation, because insulation is causing so many problems if it's put in incorrectly. It stands to reason that we actually need to look at it more closely. So our inspection regime might say 1 foundation inspection, 3 insulation inspections. That's fine if that's what we all think the job needs to make sure it gets done properly. So I think that's a lot more sensible, don't you? But it isn't new. Again, in 2012, we started talking about risk-based approach to building control site inspections. The Zero Carbon Hub recognises that that's how it's done now. So it is advisory. It's actually applicable to all building control bodies, local authority or otherwise. And we've produced some nice, pretty inspection plan guides for clients, whether you're working on dwelling houses or flats or commercial or industrial or whatever they are. There's a different guide for different types of work. So if you want any of those, you can get them from our website, or you can ask me and I'll post you some, or however you prefer to get them. But they're readily available. Talks about why we have this, talks about the role of the developer in all this, because actually we need to remember it's still the developer's responsibility to comply with the building regulations. And I think sometimes some developers forget that. So we need to help with that. It helps us in local authorities because it helps us make sure we've got enough surveyors when and where we need them. And it helps everybody plan ahead. So at the beginning of the job, hopefully the developer, the architect, the client knows what's going to be expected. They can all have a copy of the inspection notification framework. And then you, if you're the client, can say, right, have we actually done this? Have we actually booked these inspections? Have we had these inspections? So it helps you keep control better of the project. We've also issued local authorities with a toolkit to help them learn how to do this kind of risk assessment. So there is no excuse, and they've all got nice little spreadsheets that they can type things in. We're allowed to actually look at the risk factors involved. If we have, obviously the worst risk for us in terms of a developer is a DIYer. Stands to reason, because they know nothing. Well, they know a lot now because they learnt it on the internet. It's a bit like, DIY doctors who diagnose themselves. That's a very big risk. Another very big risk to us is building notices, because there are no plans. Nothing's been checked. Everything's made up as you go along. So the biggest risk to us would be a DIYer building a new house on a building notice, and we go about every half an hour, because who knows. Best risk is a fantastic architect who's done a brilliant scheme for a company who's very used to building things, a very good client who's got a clerk of works who's using a great contractor, and then we might only need to go 3 times. So we'll only charge you for 3 times. That makes so much more sense, doesn't it? So that's why you should come back to us. Toolkit then, it sets out all the roles, sets out the 3 levels of risk, and helps the council make all that happen. So it's kind of all about working on it together. We're only allowed to specify it and charge you for it if we actually intend to go out and inspect. Which again, there are building control people who are making a lot of promises about what they're going to deliver. They're not actually doing inspections. Surely that's what you've paid for. Surely that's what you actually want, is somebody to be that second pair of eyes and make sure that the work is really carried out in compliance with regulations and good practice. So you do get what you pay for, don't you? Things that haven't changed. There is still a requirement that no more than 5 days after completion, we should be told that the project's finished. Pretty much finished. Very few projects are actually 100% finished and shiny on the day of completion. We're talking about the stuff that's building control relevant. There is still a requirement to notify 5 days before occupation. Normally that's the same notification, isn't it? Not much stays empty for very long once it's finished. There is still a requirement that if somebody from building control says we haven't seen enough, we told you we wanted to see that beam, you've covered it all up, we're going to need to have a look at it, please. Can you open it up for us? There's still a requirement to comply with that. So the kind of old-fashioned building control things are still there. We've just sort of modernised how we do it, I guess. And again, completion. Self-certification schemes. We have a huge amount of self-certification schemes now, don't we? We've got Fencer, we've got Gas Safe, we've got things about renewables, we've got all sorts of self-certification schemes. The requirements used to say that building control would get sent information about them once a month. Didn't actually say what they had to do with them. So local authorities used to kind of keep them in the wardrobe in the corner of the staff canteen, and they weren't searchable, they weren't retrievable, and the requirement has changed now, and it all has to be searchable and retrievable, which makes it a whole lot more sensible, really. More point in sending it in if somebody's going to actually be able to look it up when something changes hands in the future, or you want to look. So that has changed. It brings difficulties, particularly for local authorities, because we have to do a lot of administration of all these things that make other people money, and that makes us upset, as I'm sure you can understand. So we have to administer initial notices from approved inspectors, and we have to administer all the competent person schemes and now be able to keep them sensibly. We look after demolition. We will look after demolition sites and contracts and things, and also we look after dangerous structures, which is the most exciting thing about being in building control, actually, because you get phone calls in the middle of the night from firemen telling you that they need to see you urgently because something's falling down, and that is actually, when you're used to dealing with boring building control, that is quite exciting. So we don't really mind doing that bit for nothing, but some of it we do. Some of it we were very hampered by ridiculous local acts. And that's a nightmare for you, isn't it? Because if you're working in different boroughs and you have to be aware of all these other local bits of legislation, that was very complicated for people. So things tended to get missed, and it was just another hurdle that you had to get over. There were all of these local acts, all about fire. And they've all gone. So that's quite nice, isn't it? So if you did used to have to, that doesn't mean that if you're working in Letchworth Garden City, you do still have to go and talk to the Heritage Foundation and things like that. So there are still local requirements, but there aren't the local acts, and that's different. London in particular, that's been repealed on the 9th of January last year rather. So that, there are things, Section 21 was about uniting of buildings, that's also been repealed. Again, much easier. You'll still need to consult with the fire brigade, but there's just a little bit less to consult on now. But the whole of the London Act hasn't gone, so the bits in the London Act that talk about things like dangerous structures are actually still in place. They're still there and they still apply. Warranties. Talk about warranties. How many of you are involved with getting warranties for your new builds? Not that many of you. How many of you do new build but don't have warranty on them of any kind? Well, that's good. That's quite encouraging, isn't it? I think, because I think a warranty is it's important, but it's not critical anymore because they've actually removed the warranty link rule. So that is a big change that's happened recently. However, if somebody still needs a property to be mortgageable, if somebody's intending to borrow against that property, you will still need to get a warranty. It's just that there was a requirement that all of you had to have a warranty for things, which was perhaps a bit onerous because you're looking after it yourself. Did you actually need that warranty? I've got to do a little sales pitch here to tell you that we do actually offer a warranty. So some of you may have used another warranty with a 4-letter name, NHBC. There's an LABC one. It's 10 years. It's approved by everybody, and it's insurance backed, etc., etc. And we offer that for new homes, social housing, commercial, basically whatever you're building, we can sort you out a warranty on. It's quite good because it's done alongside local authority building control. So if the warranty inspector hasn't seen something, instead of making you dig it up, he'll just phone us and say, "Did you see it?" And we'll share photographs and site records and that sort of thing. So it's quite nicely tied up and linked up, which makes it a bit more helpful. Again, key stage inspections, they're done by different inspectors just to keep that degree of separation, because a warranty tends to look at very different things from building control. In building control, there's nothing actually really in the building regs that says you have to put any paint on your wooden window frames. You know, that's how low a standard building control is. But obviously warranty will have different requirements. They will have higher standards for certain things. So that's why some people still like to use them. Obviously part of the Consumer Code of Conduct and with CML sign-off. And then I have to say that other listings magazines or indeed warranties are available, because we're not allowed to just do blatant advertising. Anybody heard of this new idea that local authorities can actually become approved inspectors? Can you imagine what that's doing in the building control world? See, we used to have this lovely, who was in construction before 1985? We used to have this lovely, cosy, sewn-up monopoly where building control was all like planning, and you had to go to the council and you had to get what you were given, and, you know, that's all how it was. And that all kind of got shaken up a little bit when we were told that we were in competition with approved inspectors, the NHBC, for new housing. And, you know, building control surveyors were jumping off office blocks and crying in the toilets and everything, because it was a change. It was a slight overreaction at the time. And as time's gone on, we've now become in competition for absolutely everything that we do. Fair enough, we were all still local authorities, we all had the same ethos still, we were doing the same things, and we were all together against those awful private sector approved inspectors. So we all knew where we were. And then the government decided last year that we're allowed to apply to become local authority approved inspectors. Whoa, how does that work? So a local authority can set up a separate private company to do building control outside their area. That's a bit weird, isn't it, for a local authority to be allowed to do that? Only outside their area. So what are all the other local authorities around doing? They're all panicking. Now, this could be a good thing for you, because you should see service levels go up. And it should be lovely, because you've got even more choice now. So it is confusing, but if you're working with a council, if you've always been working with that council and you like that council, you can carry on doing it, and that won't change at all. So it's a change, but it's not a change. It does, however, mean if you're working in a local authority and you hate the council, it could be a good thing, because we can get you working with another council to bypass that situation. So, you know, speak to us about it. Things that are not happening as changes to building regulations. There was quite a worry, because it came out in the consultation, that building control should be allowed to issue fixed penalty notices. Now, just think about this for a minute. Building control is a fully competitive service. We're trying to pretend we're part of the design team. No, we are part of the design team. And we're working with people as their friends. We're there to make it all lovely and make it all happen. But we're going to come along with our little pad and and we're going to slap notices on you if you do anything naughty. They don't really go together very well, do they? Do you all remember what old building inspectors used to look like? Nobody's got a tweed jacket in here. Do you remember building inspectors in tweed jackets? They used to get them, when geography teachers had done with them and put them in the Oxfam shop, building inspectors used to buy them, and then so you could spot them on site. Some of those dinosaur-y building inspectors would love fixed penalty notices, wouldn't it? That would really get them out of bed in the morning. I'm going to do 12 today. And we said that isn't how we do building control. Building control is supposed to be about talking to people and saying, now let's look ahead, what are you going to build next? Have you thought about this? And let's avoid that happening, and brilliant, all sorted. We haven't taken anybody to court for years. Because you don't need to, do you, if you talk to people and discuss things and point things out? So fixed penalty notices and then stop notices. They wanted us to have stop notices. Oh, we're going to shut your site down because you've left a handrail off. Oh, we didn't like that either. And we fought very, very, very hard to not have any of that because we don't think it's very good for the construction industry. And the really good news is they said, all right, we'll listen to you. We'll leave it like it is. So that is good news. So there are no stop notices, fixed penalty notices, traffic warden-y kind of building control people, which has got to be good news. Also, some people, all the approved inspectors said, oh, you should get rid of local authorities, make everybody approved inspectors. And they said, no, we like how it is at the moment, we like choice, and some people actually like to be able to work with their local authority. And all the local authorities said, oh, you should get rid of approved inspectors because they're all charlatans. And they said, no, they're not. People need a choice. So that's not changing either. You've still got a choice. And then some people, of course, like the builders, said, why don't you get rid of building control? Because they say that every time they look at the building regs. And the government said, actually, no, because we like building control, consumers like building control, landlords like building control, we're going to keep it. So they've tweaked it, but they haven't broken it. So it's all still there.